Welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, and my guest today is Rick Lite. Hello, Rick.
Hello, Bill.
Thank you for joining us and giving us your time and your insights. Rick is the president of Stress-Free Book Marketing, a company that helps authors, independent authors, achieve the success they're looking for with their titles and importantly, the marketing aspect of that. So basically, Rick is a full service. You want to get your book out there, you see Rick. Is that a fair assessment?
That is very fair. We handle both the self-publishing side, the creative side, and the marketing and promotional side.
Okay. And how did this get started, Rick? I know that you and your wife, Lori, kind of merged into this. She at the time was an author, a successful author, and you were at the time not in the publishing business, but you saw the need and the opportunity, and the two of you got this thing going. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the story is I was in a different industry. I was a headhunter, and I wanted to help my wife try to launch her publishing firm. She writes children's stories that help kids with stress and anger, anxiety, self-esteem, self-reliance. And she was a pioneer in that industry, and she was having some challenges getting going. I happened to be between jobs, and I thought I'd help her for a month. Well, 20 plus years later, I'm still in the business. And about 13 years ago, I saw a need to really focus on the marketing side because we had struggled with marketing and promoting the books, how to get them out to the target audience, how to get them out to the world, bookstores, and all the things that authors today are trying to figure out. And I came across a lot of people that wanted to know how we experienced success, and we did, fortunately. So I started a marketing agency called Stress-Free Book Marketing. And we focus specifically with independent authors to help them launch their books and get them out to the world.
And that's a very worthwhile and necessary area to work in. So thank you for seeing that and helping so many of us who are independent authors kind of navigate this. Stress-Free Book Marketing has been referred to as the complete author platform. So assume that I have a book either written and or a concept for. How do I go about getting in touch with you, and what's the process in a nutshell?
Well, we try to make the process stress-free. Launching a book and creating a book should be a fun experience. It's like having a child. If they're looking for the creative side, if somebody has a manuscript and they're looking to put a book together, they need a cover, they want professional interior design, or they want editing, we can help them with that. We can also take them from the point where their book is being created to shift and focus on the marketing side. And that is making sure that we have readers lined up to review the book, to write the reviews online where books are sold, to promote the book, to use the tools that are available to get their story out to their target audience. So it could be, in a lot of cases, full service. You come with a manuscript, we'll work with you and collaborate with you to do the rest. Or sometimes we'll just get somebody that has just published a book and they need help getting it out to the world. So we can help them in either way.
Okay, so Rick, at what point do you typically start with potential or an existing author? Are you able to help them from the first time they put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, if you will, and guide them on how to write a good book? Or is it, I've got your book, we can get some editors to make sure that it's grammatically correct, and then we can help you with the marketing? I mean, at what point does stress-free marketing really jump in?
We normally will jump in either during the writing process or after the editing process. We don't really specialize in the writing side. There's plenty of resources out there for authors to use if they're struggling or if they're not a strong writer. We'll get involved, and we're usually referred to from editors or self-publishers that might be working with a client who has a need at that point. So the earlier we can get involved with somebody, the better, because we can start building an author platform that'll be used to spring off of when they're looking to promote the book.
That's a key point, Rick. A lot of us, and I keep saying us because my lone published book to date was self-published, and self-published, I have to admit, very poorly, because a lot of what you're talking about, I wasn't aware of and I didn't do. I didn't pre-plan all of the platform to launch a book and to continue its marketing. So that's why I find your site so intriguing, and why I wanted to bring it to my listeners, because we all have a book inside of us.
Right.
Some of us have more than one book inside of us.
Right.
The challenge is getting started, and part of that is, what do I do if I write a book? So one of my dear friends and my writing coach, John David Mann, co-author of The Go-Giver and dozens of other internationally bestsellers, has a course on how to write a book called Writing Mastery, and that's something I would urge anyone to get to. And but that's not necessary if you have someone like you that, as helpful as that is, it's not an absolute necessity to have a writing coach. If you have a book, get in touch with someone. In this case, get in touch with Rick and say, here's where I am, and you'll be able to kind of give them an assessment and say, okay, you keep writing, and here's what we'll do. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's the only part that we're not seeing a lot of is the actual writing side. If somebody is penning a book, they're not really asking us, hey, do you think this is good? I'm not really qualified as an editor to talk about storylines and consistent threads through a book. There are tons of resources, both in books like your colleague, or writing groups, writing clubs, book clubs. Anybody that can give you feedback could be used as a resource to help you advance the story. I'm not getting involved that early in the process. We're coming in when the book is being put together. They're kind of finalizing some things, and now they want it professionally edited, maybe to check on consistencies and certainly punctuation and other proofreading strategies. That's where we see people. So maybe 3/4 of the way through a project, or 80% through a project, we'll start to touch base with the author to talk about the end of the project and the beginning of the marketing and promotion side, or putting it together. If they just come up with a manuscript and they need someone to professionally design that or come up with a cover, or if they know editors, we can help them with all that as well.
Which is key, because so many people, marketing is one of those things, in my experience of doing it for most of my life, that people think is easy because it's, I can draw this or I can say that, and it's not that simple. It's a blend of talent and science, if you will. And so having someone that has been down that path is a good starting point. Have you had an occasion, Rick, where you're not part of the writing process? You're not part of the editing or the evaluation process, but have you had clients that have come to you and you've done the best you can to market, and it just turns out that what they've produced is just not that good of a book?
Rarely. Years ago, I would look at people, clients whose writing might not have been the strongest. Part of my evaluation is seeing what their writing is like. So I need to see a book, and that book has to be professionally edited for us to work with somebody. And mothers and grandparents and friends that are, English teachers don't count. It has to be professionally edited. So it's rare that happens, but there are some things that come into play when you're marketing a book. If the genre's a little bit too focused, there's a smaller target audience, so you might not get as much success. But a vast majority of the clients that we work with are getting the success that we're able to produce for them. And keeping in mind that book marketing is a multi-year journey. It's rare that somebody gets the traction that they need and they don't have to do anything after a while. You are marketing a book for years, You're trying to work on different strategies over those years. Some of them are heavy lifting in the beginning and they become easier as you go on. But you always should be talking about marketing, promoting, looking for ways to get your book out there.
And that's so important, Rick. Thanks for putting it that way, because that's true not just in publishing and marketing a book. That's true in most every element of marketing. Marketing is not an instantaneous, you go viral and you're done for the rest of your life and lavishing in success. Um, in your experience, is there a typical tipping point you can time-wise, or is it completely dependent and interdependent on the book and the efforts that they're making and the niche that they're targeting?
Yeah, a lot of it is the effort that they're making. Authors that put in as much energy and effort in collaboration with us tend to do better. We can't do everything for people. We can do a lot of things for them in the beginning of the process, but at some point they need to be out there and be as active as we are. Not just during the time that we're working together, which is typically 3 to 5 months, but after and on. So, I think once they get that boulder over the hill, if you want to use the tipping point analogy, then it becomes a little bit easier, but it's as important for them to stick with that and continue to promote and market the book.
Yeah, so persistence.
Absolutely.
Persistence
Like anything else in life.
Yeah, good point. So let me go back a little bit in the life of Rick Lite, because long before you and Lori started Stress-Free Books, and long before you started being a headhunter in the IT world, there was a Rick Lite. Give me a little bit of story about you and how you got from start to IT headhunter.
Yeah. Well, first of all, back in the day, it was Ricky Lite. So born Richard, parents named me Ricky, and I could tell the college friends and high school friends from the professional world where I'm called Rick. So I grew up in New Jersey to a middle income family, loving parents, 2 siblings. I wasn't the best student in school. I had some learning disabilities that in those days weren't really recognized as they are today, and parents that did their best to help me out with that. But I worked diligently through school, went to college at the University of Hartford up in Connecticut, graduated in 4 years, which in today's world is amazing, and almost immediately went to work as a headhunter. I had a referral to a company that I figured I'd give it a shot. I wanted to do something in broadcast or radio or television, and I wasn't really sure what. So I went into what I thought would provide a good career for me. Started out at $115 a week and, ended up with a very nice career, ended up with a senior position, left the business, went back into the business, went into the wireless business, cellular early on because that was exciting, and ended up back in IT. And from there, it was helping my wife, Lori, and now the marketing side. So I wouldn't say it's a typical career and typical life, but certainly had its highs and lows and challenges like everybody else's life. And I certainly recognize that more and more now as an adult, as a father and a grandfather. I see back on areas that I might have done differently or things that I might have done differently, knowing that I'm here today talking to you because of those decisions I made.
And you made so many good points there. Interesting, your career path. It seems like almost immediately, almost serendipitously after college, you found a career opportunity that suited you very well. When you were a kid growing up in New Jersey, Ricky, well, was there something that you saw or experienced or anything that triggered like an emotion that just burned inside of you that gave you like some aspirations, whatever that might be? And as a corollary to that, did you as a kid have any direct aspirations to what you wanted to do as an adult?
I don't think the latter was something I focused too much on. I was busy trying to be a kid, trying to get through school, loved sports. I wasn't thinking I had to be. I knew I was going to college. That was ingrained in my DNA from my parents. But I don't know if I really thought I would want to focus into something. As far as events, there's probably two things that happened, not so much as a child, but two major events in my life that shaped the rest of my existence. One was the death of my father at my age of 25. He passed away suddenly from heart complications. And that certainly shaped who I am today, and things that I feel like I missed and would love to have that opportunity to have him in front of me and talk to him as an adult, as a grandfather, like most people would. And the other was my uncle was in a business that had a factory in Newark, New Jersey. And I remember visiting that factory and was amazed at how products were made and how they were shipped and moved. And I thought to myself briefly, this is pretty cool, but it was more from an educational standpoint. Not that I wanted to go into his business or go into a manufacturing business, but it was a huge warehouse with the train tracks going through the warehouse that they would load, the leather which they produced for cars and other things. And I remember that was my first exposure to technology in those days and manufacturing. And I thought that was I remember my eyes being open to the point where I just couldn't stop talking about it.
That's really intriguing because it triggered something, and what that bubbled up to be eventually. Can you pinpoint where that might have? I mean, that's a starting point for something that bubbled up inside of you. Where did that take you? Can you see a direct tie to that, or is it just something you're recalling now?
No, I could see a direct tie to my interest in learning. I became very interested in how commerce moved, how how products were made. I still, to this day, I watch shows on television about how things were made. I'm just fascinated by how people can think in a way that is so elevated that they can put together products or assembly lines or even the smallest manufacturing tools that are out there to make the product and their profits, larger by automation and things like that. So I definitely can draw a parallel between that day and my interest in how things are made, how things work, how things move.
That is something that I urge all of my clients and now all of my listeners to give some thought to. Go back in your childhood. Was there something that really triggered a positive emotional spark that gave you some excitement? And even if you haven't followed it, is there a way to tap into that now that you're an adult or becoming an adult or whatever stage in life you are? Because I believe that when we're kids, things spark for a reason. And all too often, I don't think we harvest that as well as we might be able to. So whether you knowingly followed that spark or whether you can just look back now, hindsight being what it is, which is a good thing. But you make a great example, Rick, of, there are things that trigger us and latching onto them and embracing them is the best thing, because that's part of the reason I do this show is, people oftentimes don't know where they want to go, aren't comfortable with where they are. I talk a lot about purpose, Simon Sinek, what's your why? Knowing where we're going and knowing what excites us as much as anything is the key to success. And it's not following our passion, it's knowing our why. And then hopefully we like where that brings us.
Right.
And that seems to very much be the case with you. Let me jump back, please, to the stress-free kids, because that's a very, very worthwhile area that Lori works in, helping children, helping kids. You're a grandparent. I'm a very recent grandparent once again. One more blessing in my life.
Yeah.
How did Lori get into writing? Let's shift the focus a little bit. Let's move the flashlight from you to Lori, the other half of Stress-Free Kids.
Lori was always a good writer, all the way back into middle school and high school. and college. She just enjoyed writing. The business of Stress-Free Kids was created from my son, inspiration from my son, who would take 2 hours to go to sleep every night. He definitely was ADD and maybe with a little focus on the H, hyperactivity, but he had a tough time winding down at the end of the day. So Lori would make up stories about animals and sea creatures that integrated research-based stress management techniques.
Okay.
So one of the stories is Angry Octopus, and it was a story that used muscle relaxation and breathing to calm the body and the mind. So as Lori was telling my son Austin these stories, he calmed down and fell asleep. And in some cases, fairly quickly when he was doing the techniques. So Lori, I believe, was one of the first people, if not the first person, to take these techniques that are world known, deep breathing and muscle relaxation, and weave them into stories. So one night I was outside the room, I heard her telling the story, and I told her, you need to write these stories down. These are great. Because I felt relaxed just standing outside of the room.
Yeah.
So she did. And her first book was published by a publisher, a small publisher. The second book was started with a publisher who ended up being bought out, and that project was canceled. And we decided to produce the books independently. So she would write them. We'd have them illustrated. We'd have them proofread and checked, and then she would launch it. And I had no idea. She was really doing that part on her own. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where she had a couple books out there. She made an audiobook, and she needed some help at that point because it was getting too much for her. So yeah, she still writes. She's not actively writing now, but her last book was published by Scholastic, which is the big children's book company. They approached her for two reasons. One is she was in that industry and they were looking to put together a mindful series. Mm-hmm. She worked with them, wrote a book. It was illustrated by Scholastic. It's sold in schools by Scholastic. And that we learned a lot about traditional publishing. She also has a parenting book that's traditionally published. And we realized, it's a nice accolade to be traditionally published and have companies like Simon & Schuster behind you and Scholastic. But you have to do as much work to market the book as you would if you independently publish it. And you're not making that much in terms of royalties. You're doing the work. You might as well independently publish. So the rest of the titles, books, audiobooks, curriculums, we independently published ourselves.
Okay. I want to come back to the traditional publishing versus independent publishing, but for the time being, did Lori publish under the name Lori Lite, or did she have a pseudonym? It's Lori Lite.
No, Lori Lite.
Okay.
Lorilite. You can Google her and see all the work that she's done.
And you can also go to the show notes, and Lori's information will be there, along with all of Rick's and certainly the stress-free book marketing information. So, and all of the social media that goes along with that. So traditional book publishing always seems to be the mindset that I need to get to a Simon & Schuster or whomever, Penguin, whoever the big publishers are. And that's great because it can really open a lot of doors. I mean, they are an industry. They have the ultimate platform for books. They may not always be the most directly supportive of the author itself. And I say that because very often in my understanding, in my research, and my experience from talking to others, they take a lot of control. And as the author, you lose a lot of control.
Absolutely.
And some of that's okay. Some of that is their experts and expertise improving your product. And we have to, as authors, be open to that. But we also need to be aware of the fact that if you're going that route, it's a tough nut to crack, and you don't have as much control. So it's potentially, it's a trade-off, I think. Tell me if I'm on track here, Rick. It's a trade-off between the potential huge network of a traditional publisher and the control and independence being an independent author self-publishing.
I think that's accurate. It's something that everybody should try to experience. If you're going to write multiple books, you should try to get traditionally published with one of your titles. It's just a nice thing to have. But you're correct in saying that you lose control, creative control. They kind of tell you what they're going to do and how they're going to market it. And in some cases, like the Scholastic, I found it to be a very educational process because they knew the age group that the book was for. They knew how many words needed to be on a page. They knew what words needed to be used and what words shouldn't be used. And if you said this word, it meant this. And it was a very interesting process that I've used in my business with some of the children's authors that came through our doors in helping them refine their manuscript. You know, too many words on a page for a 5 or 6 year old kid is not good. They're starting to learn how to read, or they're diving into the reading part of it. There's some good points that they made that I really appreciated. But you're making 12% royalty, net royalty at the end of the day. And yes, you didn't pay for an illustrator, you didn't pay for an editor, interior designer, and you have the book and it's yours, and you have that flag you can wave. But you really, unless you're selling tons and tons of books, it's not something that you're going to quit your job over.
You make a great point that no doubt there's a tremendous amount of expertise that one gets by working with a traditional publisher or anyone whose industry is to do what you're trying to get into. They have their knowledge and their insights and their control for a reason. And that's fine if you're open to being flexible. And if I'm going traditional publishing, I need to be able to suspend my ego to the point of saying, yeah, they have a point here. My first book, which was Women Who Won, I sent what I thought was a final draft to John Mann, who I mentioned earlier, saying, well, what do you think? And he sent a message back, and the headline in all caps was, "Stop the presses."
Oh, no.
And my first thought was, and it had not gone to press yet, but my first thought was, how dare you? I know what I'm writing. And then I stopped and said, this is an internationally acclaimed, best-selling author who does this for a living. Why don't you just wind your neck back in, as my wife would say, and listen? And that's what I did. And so there has to be, even if you're independently publishing and you go through a company like with Rick and Stress-Free Book Marketing, as an author, we need to be open to the fact that we're new at this. There's a lot of people that know things that we don't, and we need to be open to at least hearing, whether we agree with it or not. We have to accept there's other ways of looking at things, and that, listeners, is true in every aspect of our life. Yeah, that's something that I find in my experience that is absolutely essential to at least listening and saying, I accept what you're saying. I don't have to agree with it.
Yeah, Bill, one of the best things that an author can do is to have other people read their book before they go final. Absolutely, because beta readers, as they're called in our industry, they're going to be objective. They're going to be critical if they need to be. If you're fortunate enough to be part of a writing group and you can get your book read by multiple people, that's even better. Mm-hmm. But don't put something out there without other people reading it first, because once you go to press, even if you're printing on demand where they're printing one at a time, you don't want reviews coming back initially as bad reviews, because it's impossible to get those off once they're on. So like anything, if you're going to do it, you do it right. If it takes more time, do that. I find a lot of people in our industry are rushing to publish a book to get it out, even at this time of year. It's so late in the year, and you have people that have a publishing date of December 15th thinking that they're going to capture holiday sales. I mean, bookstores are buying books in August. So maybe next year, yes, but don't rush the process. Do it right. Get other people to look at it. Get other people to edit. Even after an editor reads it, have other people look at it again just to triple check, because it will make a big difference.
And that's the kind of advice all of us listeners that are writing and or plan to write or aspire to write, that's the kind of advice you get from stress-free book marketing. And that's why I bring guests like Rick on this show. So if you like what you're hearing, hit like and share it with someone that you know that is an author or aspiring to be an author. Share the show. And I say that because it's going to help people, and it's going to help me in the show continue to get solid, great guests like Rick and others. So take a minute and do that for me. Hit like, hit share, and keep coming back. Rick, you talked about something that I think is really, really key to planning a successful book launch, and that is beta readers and having a group of fans, basically, or support that are going to do two things. Like you said, give us a fair assessment, an accurate assessment without fear of hurting our feelings and saying, like, stop the presses, but also people that will then, once they read it, will give you the reviews and give you the ratings, right? That's a pretty key point, is it not?
Yeah, that is really an area that a lot of people should focus in on. If you bring your followers, your friends, family, colleagues, alumni, whoever loves you and wants to see you successful, if you bring them through the process of your writing, of your book creative, of the launch and all, they will do anything for you. And including reading the book. If you make them feel like they're part of the team and they're special, they will be your best advocates out there. So beyond the physical work of reading a book or being a beta reader, people want to feel like they're part of your project. And, you can show them half of the cover or two covers and say, which one do you like? I'd love your feedback. They feel empowered to help you. And that's something that not a lot of authors do. They announce that they're writing a book, and the next time they touch somebody is when they're asking for a review. And although, good friends should do it anyway, a lot of people would feel very honored if you brought them through that process because you care.
Yeah, and it is a two-way street. I hadn't looked at it like that. That's a great perspective. Thanks for opening my eyes to that. And you talk about, you go to friends and you would hope that they would give you a review and hope that they would buy the book, which leads me to how many friends do all of us have? And there's an old adage that if you were to have a huge event in your life, be it your wedding or your funeral, if you had 400 people there, it would be massively successful. 400 books is not going to make you a successful author. What is the average, or what's kind of the parameters of books that go out there? Because I've heard a bunch of different numbers of success, and I bring this up just so that we can all manage our own expectations.
Sure, that's a very important part of this process is having the right expectations. So you're asking what percentage of people become successful?
Well, what number of book sales is considered successful?
It depends on what your goals are. I have clients that are writing a book just to tell a story. It's really designed for family and friends and maybe some people to buy it. And I have other clients that want to be bestseller. So the expectations have to be managed from the beginning for everybody. First of all, it's extremely hard to become a bestseller. Mm-hmm. If there are places out there that will claim that they can get you to be an Amazon bestseller in one day, but the next day you're back in hundreds of thousands and the day after in the millions. So doing that for one day is not going to help you. You want to have sustained growth where every month you're selling more and more and more books. It's hard to put a number on that, but certainly if somebody's in the several hundred or a couple hundred books a month category, depending on how many books they have or, depending on their genre, I would say that's successful. But keep in mind, success, as you know, is measured differently. Some people don't have that. They're not expecting to be, a top seller or selling thousands of books. Most people just want to get their investment back, whatever they paid to have the book produced or book marketed. So other professionals are coming up with books because they speak and they do a lot of events like that, and they want the book to be something that they could sell at one of their engagements, or the book to bring in business for speaking engagement. So a lot of them are just, it's different goals for each
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, I had heard that the majority of books, and I don't have a percentage. So again, grain of salt, this is like third party,
Yeah.
twice repeated and twisted information, but something like, you know, most books that get published, self-published on Amazon, if they hit 200 to 250 copies, they're in the upper echelon of book sales. So it's, and again, I just bring this up because you hit a key point again, Rick, and thank you. I'm big on those of us that are trying to do this, managing our expectations. If I write a book and I'm thinking I'm going to sell 10,000 copies and you know, that's likely not going to happen. And it's going to take a really good book and really good marketing to do that. So I want to make sure that we manage our expectations there. You know, let me ask you a little thing, a little something off the topic that we've been, is what piece of advice, if any, have you been given in your life at any point that you are tremendously grateful not to have followed?
It's a good one. Advice that I was instructed not to follow?
No, advice that you were given that you
Given.
chose not to follow, and you're grateful that you chose not to follow it.
Yeah, that's one. I mean, I can look at a past career in wireless. I was told that I needed to stay in New York to be successful in that business. We were there early days before there were a big presence in New York City. There was one carrier in New York, and that was Bell South at that point. And I was working my way up in sales and position. And I was told that if I ever left New York, that I wouldn't be successful in that business. And I found myself in Atlanta. I wanted to leave New York. I stayed in the wireless business. In fact, one of the carriers brought me down and relocated me down to Atlanta. And that made that process easier. But I was much more successful in Atlanta and much happier than I was up in New York.
And the counterpoint to that question is, what's the most pointed piece of criticism that you've received that actually helped you grow? And by that, I mean things like my response from John that said, "Stop the presses, stop the presses." You
I
know,
still laugh at that one.
Feel free to use it.
Yeah. In this business, when I first started, I was more focused on getting results than I was in communicating those results with my clients. And I have a woman who I was speaking to at one point who was extremely unhappy with the way I was working with her. I hadn't talked to her in a few weeks. She had no idea what I was doing for her. And I was busting it out. I just wasn't sharing that information. I wasn't communicating with her. And she got extremely angry. She wanted to terminate the agreement. And I was taken back because here I thought I was doing a great job for her. And what I learned from that and what I implemented almost immediately was when I work with a client, especially in the beginning for the first couple months, I have a weekly call with them. And on that weekly call, we talk about what I've done, what they're doing. We collaborate. We come up with ideas. We do training. We talk about different strategies. Whatever needs to happen on that call, it's a check-in call. And that check-in call, that weekly check-in call, has been probably one of the more instrumental things that I initiated after getting my you-know-what handed to me.
And a great point there about the importance of communication, but also a great example, a great story of what can happen when we're open to criticism and don't get defensive. When I can reduce my ego and listen to it and say, you know, what's the point of that? What should I learn from that? And speaking of that, one final question for you, Rick, and that is, however you choose to define it, in whatever area, very simply, what's the point?
The point of life is to do what you love to do and figure out a way to make money doing it.
Simple, direct, impactful. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that very much. And again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insights. And everyone listening, all of Rick's and Lori's information will be in the show notes. Reach out to him if you have any inclination of writing a book, and at whatever stage you're at, and he can give you whatever insights he can specific to your situation. So reach out to Rick. And listeners, reach out to me if you have thoughts for a guest you'd like to hear, or if you have comments to make this show better, or how it can become more impactful to you. Hit me up at bill@billellis.com. And again, if you like what you're hearing, hit like, hit share. We appreciate your listening. And Rick, again, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Bill. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise there is value to be gained in every one. Taking a second to rate, review, and share the show helps make us more discoverable and enables others to find out what's the point. If you'd like to learn more about Bill Ellis and his services, please visit his website, billellis.com. See you next time.